Welcome to the HMG Strategy Cyber Update, a weekly, in-depth discussion of the most pressing cybersecurity topics explored by the industry's top security experts.
Hello and welcome to HMG Strategy's Cyber Update. Wow, what an amazing 10 days it's been in the cyber world. Today we have an amazing program with special guests, Cliff Triplett, Executive Director at Kearney, as well as Israel Martinez, founder and CEO of Axon Global. A lot going on with the executive orders out of Washington from the White House. Over to Cliff. Cliff, what are your thoughts on where we stand here? What really happened?
I think the story is a lot bigger than Colonial. I think Colonial is more just an exhibition of the problem that could exist out there, the vulnerability. We have there's been a lot about policy. There's been standards from NIST and other organizations. Unfortunately, they're foundational. They're not all that needs to be done to protect us from the various varieties of threat actors. More has to be done. I think the executive order recognizes that and puts steps forward for tighter relationships between the government and private sector, and the need for more directive uplift of the infrastructure and bringing concepts like zero trust to the table.
Thanks, Cliff. This is going to be a reoccurring series at HMG Strategy. A little context for folks that might not know you. Just 30 seconds, please.
Sure. I'm Cliff Triplett. Like Hunter said, I'm with Kearney. Kearney's a global consulting firm. We consult with governments, large major organizations around the world. My role is leading in the area of cybersecurity and risk management for those type clients. And as such, I work for the United States government, Department of Defense. I work with other countries in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia and such. Prior to joining Kearney, I was recruited by the President of the United States and Congress during the Obama administration to address the major weaknesses across the federal government, such as these, and begin to identify those root causes and lead and push mitigating actions.
Thanks so much, Cliff. Great to have you on the program here today. Hey, Israel, throw it over to you now. Little context of your background, Axon Global, and your thoughts on the latest current event at the Colonial Pipeline, as well as the executive orders.
Sure. So recently I've been asked, again, this is the fifth administration where I'm no more than 1 degree away from the White House on advising regarding strategy. I'm actually impressed with some of the things they've done recently, but I agree with Cliff. There's a lot of foundational things that should have been addressed a long time ago. I'm also an industry advisor for the Department of Homeland Security, especially as it relates to Cyberstorm, which is the only congressionally mandated exercise where we're looking at what happens to critical infrastructure under an attack, right? So this is the 8th one we're going through. And interestingly, much of what we practiced 2 years ago in the previous Cyberstorm exercise is playing out. So a couple of things on Colonial Pipeline, just looking through public information, if you were to grade their compliance level in cybersecurity, they were at about a B+, which begs the question for most. If they're doing that well and above most of their peers, how possibly could this have happened? And the reality is that threat actors, if they target you, will find a way in. We've kind of known it and said it, but this is the first time we've experienced it in a way where the dominoes fell, where now we have gas stations that are out of gasoline. But the reality is every one of our other critical infrastructure components can be victimized the same way. And what was also shocking about this one is, I won't say just it happened here. I will say that it's been common, and we'll find out later through information sources. I think the government's actually going to publish a case study on this later. But the threat actors they don't need to be that sophisticated. They're going to common vulnerabilities and they're daisy chaining these until they get to a valid credential. And then from there, they launch forward.
Is there a little context about Axon Global? What do you do and how long have you been in business?
Yeah, so we've been in business, since 2006. We are a high specialty firm that focuses on what we call forward defense, proactive defense, versus reactive. So using deceptive technologies and very practical ways that we're involved in contract with the US government and protected by Congress by the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 to be able to neutralize certain types of threats, those that are material either to the boardroom, critical infrastructure, and in support of national security.
Thank you, Israel.
Join us on May 25th at the Portland CIO Executive Leadership Summit featuring Richard Appleyard, CIO of the Oregon State Police, Krista Stout, SVP of Innovation and Technology of the Portland Trailblazers, and many other top-notch speakers. Go to hmgstrategy.com to register.
Hey, Cliff, back over to you. You know, if you were to talk to a CISO right now or a CEO or board, what would you tell them about creating a general risk framework, a risk assessment? What would the steps be? What would be your advice?
Sure, Hunter. I think there's a couple parts. The first part is identify those most critical assets that you need to protect. You just can't afford to do everything in a common way. You need to find out really what are those high risk things. Put yourself in the position of the threat actor and what would they be going after. And that's where you want to raise the bar beyond those foundational things. And so once you understand that, and then putting cyber risk, get cyber risk on the agenda with all the rest of the risk investments, because all too often, sometimes it's pushed to the side. And what happens is they're saying, hey, I'd rather get another couple miles of pipeline. And then what do you want to do over here, CIO, with cyber risk? No. It needs to be one unified conversation. Try to make that happen. Focus your investment on that. Understand your threats and understand your vulnerabilities. And your vulnerabilities, right now, there's a really great model from NIST and this cybersecurity framework, which talks about the 5 major capabilities. There's been so much energy on prevent. You got to go and figure out detect, and you better figure out how to recover. I think there needs to be more energy now. You need to start thinking about you're going to get attacked. If it's like Israel said, they're going to find a way. Now, how can you contain it and how can you recover from it need to be emerging on the agenda and brought forward to the board.
Cliff, scary times right now to be a CISO or a CEO, right? I mean, again, how do you manage risk? It almost seems impossible.
It can be impossible, but if you can get down focused, I worked with one major infrastructure provider who had 10,000 critical items. We got it down to 17. Okay, and really it was 17 classes of assets. And when you get it down to something like 17, it's not so insurmountable. When it's 10,000, it's insurmountable. You're not going to win, and you're going to become extraordinarily vulnerable. Once we got that organization focused on 17, it was transformative for the business. And now they lead where they are. They are clearly the benchmark of the kind of work they're doing in security. And now they're getting actually rated by other organizations trying to learn and take people who have gone through this experience.
But for some industries more vulnerable than others?
Absolutely. Take a look at how geographically dispersed an industry is. And this is where things like pipelines, but electrical has got to be, top of the list. Gas, oil and gas, they're probably almost next. Water is not far behind. And then you got to look at, obviously, our air traffic control. I'd say they're in better situation, but no one's perfect. And there's two sides to that. There's the flight part, and then there's the airport part. Both can be easily under attack, but I put them a little bit lower on the list. I mean, the number one to me is electrical. You take out electrical, you take out just about everything else.
Interesting. Thank you, Cliff, for your insights. Hey, Israel, back over to you. When you look at the executive orders, what really stood out for you?
The number one thing to me was there's now a mandate that technology providers must provide certain information to the U.S. government if asked. So if you have an NDA in place, confidentiality agreement in place, that no longer is a place to hide. So that means if you have someone that's done any type of penetration testing in your organization, almost any IT provider, if they're asked, you're going to have to turn this information over.
Are all board of directors, are they exposed? Are they legally culpable?
Okay. So there's a few things going on there. I mean, we've trained now over 200 of the Fortune 500 board directors in the last 24 months in cyber enterprise risk management, and a lot more in the Russell 2000. And we do it in an environment, again, where we're protected by the Cybersecurity Act of 2015. So we bring real counterintelligence about espionage and other things happening in their networks that they've never seen before. The IT departments just can't see it. In fact, they don't have the right to see it most of the time because of where it is and how it's happening. So at that point, there are very candid conversations. They're worried about two things. Number one is my D&O insurance going to sue me for negligence or failure of fiduciary responsibility, because the last 4 or 5 derivative lawsuits and major breaches have done just that, right? Your same insurance company is supposed to be covering you is now turning against you. So the answer to your question is yes, there is some liability and risk there. And then there's a lot of momentum and policy now with the Department of Justice on how to hold people criminally liable. And the reality of that is corporations have had the opportunity through DHS to take advantage of things like the Cybersecurity Act to share threat information without the risk of being sued with that information or being held criminally liable. And people are just holding information too close to the chest. So this administration is really focused about breaking that open using every tool they have.
So Cliff and Israel, great to have you. What a great segment. Wow, really great insights and thought leadership. You guys truly are rock stars in terms of our industry, helping HMG Strategy cover what matters most in cyber. Hey, stay with HMG Strategy, stay with Hunter, and come to an upcoming cyber summit. We have 2 cyber summits coming up and a series of CIO summits where we cover cyber at every summit. So again, stay with HMG Strategy and stay with Hunter.
To learn more about the HMG Strategy community, go to hmgstrategy.com. And while you're there, be sure to visit the HMG Marketplace to connect with industry-leading technology providers.